Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Gridiron 2022. Dr. Ron Poniewasz and Professor Larry Kelly with you this week. Mr. Kelly is a member of the Luxembourg, Arbit, Kelly & George law firm, as well as the Shenango varsity baseball coach. And this is our championship edition of Gridiron, as Union won last week's championship. And before we go too much further, Larry Kelly, welcome aboard.
If I knew the Union Victory March, I'd be singing it. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, it's the same as Notre Dame. I think I heard it during after one of the touchdowns. Cheer, cheer for old Union High. Is that it? Bring down the thunder, calling their name. Listen,
you got it.
I was on pins and needles watching that game. I wanted them to win so bad. And they did. Thank you for having me, man. Let's talk about the Scotties. That's what it's all about.
Tell you what, Larry, as a lot of people know from me saying it, I got over here in 2001. And so that's where my Lawrence County journey begins. And Union High School has always been that school that you want to root for naturally, especially in football. They're behind the eight ball every time that the season starts. There's not a whole lot of kids that go out. And like former coach Stacy Robinson would say, football is not for everybody. And what he means by that is it's a rough physical sport. It takes a lot of time and demands a lot of you and your body. And you know what? Union's just been that team that school that you want to root for, you want to get behind. And it's great to see them having the success they are having and the championship that they got, well-deserved, well-earned. Larry, just your thoughts on that.
Man, I watched the game. It wasn't just well-earned. It was total domination, if you ask Larry Kelly. All I kept hearing from the announcers who were doing the game on Trib Live is how Bishop Canavan had 4 1,000-yard rushers. How Bishop Canavan had this quick strike capability, how they had the ability to turn a game around within a play or two. Well, guess what? They didn't turn anything around. They got stuffed. The Scotties showed up. They stood tall, and they were. That game was no fluke, Ronnie. Union was the better team, and they were the better team by a long shot on that day. So, the Bishop Canavans of the world, they can go out and get whoever they want from whatever part of Allegheny County they feel they need to go get them, and then come and bring them. Go get whoever you think you need. And the Scotties were waiting for them. Total domination, 26-0. Union High School, first championship since 1959. Tremendous.
Yeah.
And I know there were, let me just say this. I wasn't the happiest guy in Lawrence County, but I can tell you this much. There wasn't anybody happier than I after that game was over. What a great game.
Yeah. And, I've naturally been talking to Kim Needball for several weeks doing playoff previews and even covering their games in the regular season. And invariably, anytime I ask him, Coach, what are the keys to victory? Asking him that question is almost like asking Ralph Blundo, any question regarding whatever. You just feel like you've asked him that question and he answers it the same way. First and foremost, we got to turn the other team over, get turnovers, and we have to maintain possession ourselves. Look at that game. I think Union had 1 turnover. How many turnovers did they create? How many turnovers or defensive scores did they have in that game? Just everything went the way Coach Needball would draw it up on any given week.
Well, we talked about it, and I went back and reviewed our pregame last week, and I talked about Union having to score a lot of points because, quite frankly, I thought Bishop Canavan was going to score a lot of points, but they didn't. We talked about Braylon Thomas making big plays, and he did. He scored 2 touchdowns, 1 on a 6-yard run, 1 on a 38-yard run. We talked about Union turning them over. They turned them over 4 times, 2 fumble recoveries and 2 interceptions, and 2 of those turnovers directly led to touchdowns. Mike Gunn returns one 59 yards. Matthew Stanley makes a great play, stripping a Canavan runner and returning it 32 yards for a touchdown. You know, those are the things that you have to do in a championship game, and Union did it. And they did it with flying colors. Union High School, that was no fluke. They were the best team on the field on Friday morning. Nobody could say this game was a fluke. Nobody could say that because it wasn't. Union was better. Their big-time players were better than Canavan's big-time players. And Canavan had some pretty good players on the field. Mike Gunn, Braylon Thomas, Matthew Stanley. I'm going to give a shout out to another young man, sophomore. I watched that game. Jamil Mitchell was outstanding. He was unblockable. He spent more time in Bishop Canavan's backfield than Bishop Canavan's quarterback spent back there. This kid dominated the line of scrimmage. Union controlled the line of scrimmage in that game. And that's why I say the better team won, and it wasn't even close. Union ran the ball for 151 yards, and Canavan, notwithstanding their 4,000-yard runners, Ronnie, their net rushing for the game was 9 yards. 9, my brother. You take all of the times they ran the ball, it doesn't amount to a first down. That's why Union High School is the WPIAL champ.
Yeah, and when you look at the box score, you look to see the total yard where they are with their yards. You mentioned 9 rushing yards. They got a lot of their rushing yards or their total yards in the last couple of minutes when the game was totally out of hand, and Union's not playing prevent, but they're just trying to stay healthy and stay out there and get the kids on the ground. And so naturally you're going to give up some yardage. And that's where a lot of Bishop Canavan's yards were in just the last couple of minutes when the game's out of hand. And who cares how many yards you have at that point?
Yeah, they gave up like 1 or 2 big pass plays in the middle of the field right at the end of the game, but the game was over. The game was over. Yeah, they had 170 passing yards, and probably 100 of them came in the last drive. Union dominated the game. They dominated the play. They dominated the line of scrimmage. They dominated the big plays in the game. They created points off their defense. They did all of the things that championship teams do. This was no fluke. Union High School was the better team, and it wasn't even close.
Larry, since anytime we have an athlete of the week, single person athlete of the week, we mention his name and grade and height and weight and position, that sort of thing. Because it's the team, I'm going to run down at the very least, the list of the players by class, by alphabet organization here. And hopefully none of these kids that I miss. Hopefully there are no kids that I miss. If so, that they did not appear on the preseason roster. So again, these are from our football tab that we printed back in August. Seniors on the team, we have 10 of them: Mason Benedict, Elijah Booker, Caden Fisher, Antonio Perez, Jaden Porio, Brendan Porter, Mark Stanley, Matt Stanley, Cam Taylor, Mike Thomas. The junior class for the Scotties goes as Grayson Blakely, Jordan Brown, Andrew Cartwright, Andrew Gettings, Marcus Gunn, Mike Gunn, Dane Jonke, Robert McCurdy, Braylon Thomas. The sophomore class goes as Rogan Hupp, Jamel Mitchell, Maddox Thompson. Your freshmen are Damian Carbone, Nick Cook, Chad Siddall, and last is Jaden Townsell. Larry, that comprises your Union Scotties for 2022, as according to our football tab. So apologies in advance if somebody was not on that roster. But what a great job that group did. And Larry, that sticks out to me, 10 kids graduate. Okay, but what you have coming back next year, you have Mike Gunn, you have Braylon Thomas, Grayson Blakely has done well this year, in a skill set position. Andrew Gettings has been a fill-in at quarterback, in games that are out of hand. So he's been getting looks in case something gets out of hand with Braylon Thomas from a health situation next year. Just your thoughts on what they have coming back. I mean, we got more games hopefully to play, at least one more. and hopefully multiple games. But Larry, just on the surface, there's a lot of talent there.
And what happens when you have a championship team? You create excitement in the school. And not only do you create excitement at the high school level, you create excitement at the junior high level. You create excitement in the Pop Warner leagues. Nothing succeeds like success. And, look, the kids in Union moving forward are going to be excited. They have a great nucleus coming back next year. This may be the start of a run of Union high school football that'll last a long time. That's what happens. You got to create excitement within your program, within your school district, and they've certainly done that this year.
Larry, let's talk about head coach Kim Needballa, first year head coach. A lot of times, Larry, as a reporter, you hear coaches say when a kid is a freshman, they'll tell the reporter, he's not a freshman anymore. We're in the playoffs. He's now a sophomore. Well, Coach Kim Needballa, by rights, he's a first-year coach. However, he coached at West A under Bob Palko. He coached at Mount Lebanon under Bob Palko. His dad was a legendary coach. Western Beavers Stadium is named after him. I think it's safe to say that, on the surface, he's a first-year coach, but really he's not a first-year coach anymore.
No, he's seen the movie before. When you coach and you are under the tutelage of Bob Palko, that's like being tutored by Albert Einstein if you want to be a scientist. Listen, and I've said this before, I was fortunate. I was an assistant coach for a long time before I was the head coach at Chenango High School. And I learned a lot about coaching from guys under who I coached. Carmen Nacera was the head coach at Westminster College, and I coached with him for 5 years. Ralph Belundo, the head coach at Newcastle High School, I coached with him for 12 years. I learned a lot from those guys about molding a team, about leadership, and I'm certain that Coach Needballa learned a boatload from Bob Palko. If Bob Palko isn't one of the best coaches in the history of the WPIAL, he's certainly in the top 5. And you can't help but become better when you are being tutored and you follow the leadership skills and practices of a coach like Bob Palko. So, this Kim Needballa has been in a bunch of championship games before this one. He might not have been the head coach, but he was certainly instrumental in many of those victories, both at West A and at Mount Lebanon.
Yeah. And, we talked about it for the Rochester preview when we did our podcast that week. We mentioned how he's going up against Gene Matsuk, and Gene's been a long tenured coach at Rochester, whereas, Coach Needballa, first rodeo as a head coach. Granted, he's been in the fire in terms of assistant coach at 2 other spots, but he showed what he can do in that regard. And then naturally in the championship game, Larry, this on the surface, it just doesn't seem like he's a first-year guy, even though he is.
Because he isn't. He's been coaching football for about 20 years. This might be his first year as the head coach, but I'm sure he was instrumental in calling the plays offensively and defensively while at West A and while at Mount Lebanon. So he's been in the fire before, But as I always say, I've been in both situations. I've been an assistant coach, and it's easy to make suggestions. But at the end of the day, the head coach got to make the call. And it's a lot tougher to be the one to make the ultimate call in a game, whether it's offensively, defensively. I used to make a lot of suggestions at Newcastle High School, but Ralph Belundo had to be the one to make the call. And the same thing when I was at Westminster College. I'd make a lot of suggestions, and Carmen Nacera had to make the call. So it's a little bit different when you're the head coach and the ultimate decision on what to do is yours. And hey, Union High School stood tall. Kim Needballa stood pretty damn tall too, buddy. And they ought to be proud. Get the fire trucks ready. That's what I was thinking when they were coming home Friday morning. No greatest feeling in the world, baby, when you're riding on that championship bus and the fire trucks are bringing you back into town. And I had that experience at Newcastle High School, and I had that experience at Shenango, and there's no greater feeling in the world than that.
Without speaking for Coach Niedball, naturally, I'm sure he probably took a little bit of the coaching advice or mannerisms from Bob Palco, possibly his dad, things like that. So, Larry, I'll ask you. You've been around Ralph Blundo, and you mentioned Carmen Nocera. When it came time to you for you to be the head coach at Shenango, is that kind of what you did? With your coaching teachings, a little bit of Carmen, a little bit of Ralph, blended in with a lot of what you believe in also.
Absolutely. In both programs, both at Westminster and at Newcastle, we talked about two things all the time: mental toughness and laser focus. And if you can get teams to be mentally tough and to be laser focused, do their job. And Ralph would talk about this all the time. Basketball is a game of runs. When things start running and going the other way, to not lose your mental toughness, to maintain your composure. That's a culture. And, those guys talked about it all the time. And I certainly talk about it every day at Shenango High School. Every day we talk about being laser focused and mentally tough. And if you can get kids to do that, you got a pretty good chance to be successful.
Yeah. And I just spoke with Kim Niedball a little while ago for our preview. As high as a kite as they were after that win, it's behind him. He says, we have to be thinking about Port Allegany. That championship win, that was last week. We have a game this week, and we're going to preview that here in a little bit, Larry. But how difficult is that for a program? You've been around Newcastle basketball long enough. I remember one game at Butler. They started out rough in the first quarter against, was it Montauk, a team that was maybe a 500 team. Right. And I remember Ralph laid into them after the first quarter. And next thing you know, they're up 30. But how tough is it to forget that?
We say it all the time. The biggest trap game in every sport is the game that follows the WPIAL championship game. Listen, winning the WPIAL championship is a big deal in Western Pennsylvania. In basketball, we either won at the Palumbo Center or we won at the Peterson Event Center on the campus of the University of Pittsburgh. The next week, we're back playing in a high school gym. Same thing at Shenango High School. We won the WPIAL championship at Wild Things Park. The next week, we're playing at a high school field somewhere. And so, Coach Niedball, these kids are coming off an emotional high where they played at AccuSure Stadium. This week, they're playing in a high school stadium. So it's the biggest trap game of your year. It's a big deal to win the WPIAL. But you got to be ready to play the next game if you want to make a run at a state championship. And, I'm sure he'll have his team focused. That's what I'm talking about. Mental toughness, laser focus. You got to be able to, hit the reset button and get ready to go again if you want to win or have an opportunity to win a state championship.
Yeah, well, by rights, it will be at a Division II stadium, Clarion. But what I read this week, and you tell me what your thoughts are. From what I read, this is the lowest attendance rate for the 4 championship games. It was less than 10,000. That's combined, all 4 classifications, and that even includes Central Valley and Aliquippa, a county rivalry, of that regard. And Larry, do you think that AccuSure will maintain those games? And what is the true, allure of that stadium? It's great for kids, but if fans aren't going, should that stadium maintain that right?
Well, here's what I think. First of all, there was no 6A championship game this year at AccuSure Stadium, and so the biggest classification, they bring the most people, right? I mean, North Allegheny and schools like that, they graduate almost 1,000 kids. And so you got more people from which to draw to attend the games. Union, they graduate 50 young men and women. If they bring every family member, there are probably only 200 people coming. So listen, the game should stay at AccuSure. It's a big deal playing in a professional stadium. It's a big deal dressing in a professional locker room. Look, I mean, just as a coach, it was a big deal to play the championship game at Wild Things Park. It was. As a basketball coach, it was a big deal to play at the University of Pittsburgh for the coaches, let alone the players. So I don't care how many fans show up. The game's about the players. The game should stay at Acrisure. They really should. And, you know, you never know. It was the day after Thanksgiving. And so therefore, you know, people are traveling. Maybe people couldn't come to the game because of the Thanksgiving weekend. But the game should stay there. In my view, that's where the game should be played.
I don't think two of the games last year were at Acrisure. I think Norwin hosted games last year. The year that Neshannock played Steel Valley, that championship game was at RMU. So not every classification gets to play at Acrisure. I'm not sure how they pick it, you know, year to year, but you know, yeah, not every classification gets to play there. So you know, it's not like this was an odd year for that or something out of the ordinary. So, Larry, any other thoughts on Union's championship win before we go into their semifinal preview?
Here's what I got to say. Cheer, cheer for old Union High. Wake up the echoes cheering her name. Listen, what a great victory. I was the happiest guy, one of the happiest guys in Lawrence County. Don't let anybody ever tell these young men that that was a fluke. They won the game. They were the better team. They dominated every statistical category. They are the WPIAL champs, baby, and they deserve to be.
Yeah, well, two things, Larry. Number one, who told you you could sing? That's number one. Number two, we know how a Shenango Wildcat roars. Let's hear a Scotty dog, Larry Kelly. Come on.
I
got
it. Yet. I could give you the Shenango Wildcat roar, but I can't give you the Scotty dog roar. But if I could, and I knew what it sounded like, I would do it. Man, listen, these young men are on cloud nine, and they deserve to be. I happened to see Mike Gunn in the restaurant today. My man Steele's floating above off the ground, you know. And like I said, his son picked one off and ran it back 59 yards. I don't think there's any greater feeling in the world as a parent than to watch your son or daughter have success, whether that be in the classroom, on the athletic field. It's just the greatest feeling in the world. I had 4 daughters who, because of my wife, have done pretty well academically and athletically, and I know it's a great feeling.
There's one thing I learned growing up around here. People should look out for each other, be friends and neighbors that you can count on. So it bothers me when people who are hurt in automobile accidents get bullied by the insurance company. I don't let bullies run over my clients. I do what I was taught growing up. Step up, stand up, and speak up for those who can't. I'm Larry Kelly, and I'm a Newcastle guy.
And Larry, we have Union, which is 11-3 overall. They're going to take on Port Allegany, which is 12-1. Again, Class 1A semifinals. This will be held at Penn West Clarion University Friday night, 7 p.m. So a little bit of a change. You know, you get used to 7 p.m. and then all of a sudden 11 a.m. And kudos to Kim Needball. Another thing that we kind of glossed over, you know, he had those kids out on the practice field last week, you know, in the morning. Why? Because you're playing at 11 a.m. Why practice at 4 or 5 p.m. when the game's at 11 a.m.? You want to get those kids used to taking the field. So now we get back to 7 p.m., and that's where we're at, Larry. We'll read over what some of the rushing and receiving and stuff like that are passing for Port Allegany, but just on the surface, 11-1, 11-3, 12-1 for our game this week.
Well, I mean, you can't just look at the records. You have to look at who is playing their best football at this time of the year, and it's clear that Union is playing its best football. I mean, to get to the WPIAL championship and win the game, they had to beat some really good teams. They beat Laurel, they beat Bishop Canavan, they beat the 1 seed, they beat the 2 seed, they beat Rochester. You know, look, I think they're playing their best football at this time of the year. I believe they're healthy. I don't believe anybody was injured, you know, that won't be playing this week. And, you know, it goes back to, hey, do your job, if you can control the line of scrimmage, Union, like you did against Bishop Canavan, and I can't believe that this team that they're playing is going to have more talent on the field than what Bishop Canavan had on the field. And so if you can control the line of scrimmage, you can create a couple turnovers, you can get Braylon Thomas to break away on a few long ones, which he did in the WPIAL championship game. You got a pretty good chance of moving on, surviving and advancing to the state final.
Yeah, absolutely. Larry, some of the things that I know in terms of Port Allegany, talking with our friends at the Bradford era, talking with the coach from Port Allegany, they are a physical team. They play up front. That's what they are. They run the ball. They will throw the ball. However, a big key for Union will be winning on first down, and that's on both sides of the ball. You want to stay ahead of the chains on offense. On defense, you want to make sure on first down you're not giving up many yards, and I'll tell you why. I asked Kim Needballa tonight, because they are so physical and they play a punishing brand of football, they like to eat the clock, they being Port Allegany. I said, what happens if it's fourth down and 1 or 2, notwithstanding on your own 10 or own 12? He said, oh, they're going for it. If it's up to like maybe 5 or 6 yards, they'll probably go for it. This is a 4-down team, Larry. They're not going to punt. So it's very imperative that Union wins these matchups on first down, and then we'll talk about, the success of the drive and from there.
Well, look, that's true in every high school football game. We've been talking about this all year. Control the line of scrimmage, be physical up front, win the rushing battle. If you do that, there's a pretty good chance you're winning the game. 9 times out of 10, you will win the game. And so, it doesn't surprise me that they run the ball. It doesn't surprise me that they want to control the clock and that they're physical up front. But the same thing could be said about Union. The one thing that separates Union is that they have players capable of making big plays. Mike Gunn, Braylon Thomas. And then you got the Stanley brothers. These cats are winners. You understand? They may not be the best athletes on the field, but there's a certain intangible of Matthew and Mark Stanley that probably they learned from their father, because I watched him play. They're winners. They're steely. They do what needs to be done to win football games and basketball games. Matthew Stanley's play of stripping that guy and then taking it in for a score is something that a special, steely determined athlete does. So Union got a few of those guys. In big games, those are the plays and those are the players that make the difference.
Yep. Okay, so Port Allegany, here we go, Larry. We have quarterback Drew Evans. Evans is 113 of 190 for 1,365 yards, 11 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He's basically a pocket passer. He can move around a little bit, that sort of thing. He'll do some wildcat stuff for him. Blaine Moses, a running back, he's 208 carries, 1,099 yards, so just a hair under 1,100 yards rushing, 20 touchdowns. He owns 5 100-plus yard rushing games. He's your bruiser of the back. I think they list him as a running back, but they call him a fullback, so he's a downhill runner, Larry. And then you got running back Noah Archer, the complement in the backfield, 156 carries, 954 yards, 12 touchdowns, and he owns 3 100-yard-plus rushing games. Port Allegany outscoring its opponents 31.1 to 9.1. So they're used to having success on offense. They're used to having success on defense. I think they've played, if I remember right, 3 one-score football games, including an 8-7 game. So they do have experience in tight ball games. And as I mentioned, they're a physical team. They're big up front too, is what I've noticed from the roster.
Sure, I'm sure they are. But you look at those statistics and you compare those stats to the team from Bishop Canavan, they pale in comparison. Bishop Canavan had 4 guys that rushed the ball for over 1,000 yards. They had 2 quarterbacks who threw it like Johnny Unitas. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, Ronnie. It matters when you buckle your chin strap and you step on the field and whether or not you believe you can get it done. And right now, there's nobody that believes more in their team, in their teammates, and in their ability to get it done than the Union Scotties, buddy. My dad always told me, if you believe you can, you will. So, hey, this is a good team. Sure it is. They're 12-1. You wouldn't expect anything different, would you? I mean, this is the Western Final. This is the PIAA semifinal. There are no cupcakes at this point. But just in case this team thinks that Union isn't coming, they're going to show up. The Scotties will be there. In case they think maybe we're not coming, we're going to be there.
I spoke with their head coach, and he told me right off the get-go, my first question was his thoughts on Union from what he saw on film. He said, listen, I don't know how many different ways I can say it, but they are an athletic bunch, athleticism. And then later on, when he mentioned, what's ahead, the title game, the winner will have earned their ticket to the state championship game. And the other thing I'd like to tell you, Larry, is I was mentioning this to Pete a week or two ago. We've went the whole season without a running back running like Tony Dorsett. Now here we go. We got a quarterback that throws like Johnny Unitas.
Well,
never cease to amaze.
I mean, that's the analogy that I use. I asked one of my kids the other day at Shenango, I said, man, you run the bases like Maury Wills. He said, who's that, coach? I never heard of him. So, I need to work on other comparisons. Maybe I should have said Patrick Mahomes. Then they certainly would have understood. But, hey, look, Union's the real deal. Anybody that underestimates their ability is making a big mistake. They were the better team clearly on Friday at Acrisure Stadium against Bishop Canevin. And I know Port Allegany's a good team, and they're going to be really good. They beat Reynolds 42-8, but that doesn't tell me much. I mean, Reynolds was not a powerhouse up in District 10. I'm assuming that's the team that they played, the Reynolds team from District 10. So, the fact of the matter is, it'll be a good football game between two evenly matched teams. But the bottom line is, whose big players will play big roles? I always say, when you get to the biggest games of the year, the championship games, if my stars are better than your stars, we're winning. And Braylon Thomas and Mike Gunn and the Stanley brothers and Jamil Mitchell, those guys stood tall, baby, against Bishop Canevin. They didn't back up a step. And I don't expect them to be backing up this week either. So, hey, it'll be a great game, but I'd never bet against the Scotties.
I don't know a whole lot about Reynolds, but I believe going into the game last week, they were 11-1. If I remember reading the Bradford Era's preview on that game. Larry, let's talk about some Union stats here. Braylon Thomas, he's got 1,521 rushing yards on 232 attempts. He's got 20 touchdowns, 8 two-point conversions. We'll touch on two-point conversions here shortly, too. Completed 75 passes and 156 attempts, 1,169 yards. He's got 10 touchdowns throwing, 13 interceptions. And you've mentioned Mike Gunn. We'll touch on Mike Gunn. He's got 417 rushing yards on 76 carries with 12 touchdowns. In addition, another 16 receptions for 210 yards. Very good numbers, certainly, for those two young men at Union High School.
Yeah, their ability to break a game open, both offensively and defensively, is special. Braylon Thomas ran one in from 38 yards out. It was a big play. Mike Gunn intercepts a ball, returns it 59 yards. They're big game and big play specialists. And, I'd be a little bit concerned about that. I don't know about Port Allegany. They better have some cats that can run in their defensive backfield, because if the Mike Guns and the Braylon Thomases get a little daylight, they could take it to the house. So I don't know what kind of speed they have back there, but they better have a bunch of it, because when these guys see a little daylight, they're dangerous.
And conversely, Union has that speed in its defensive backfield. So should Port Allegany squirt through there and break that first level of defense, Union definitely has the speed burners to make a tackle from behind. So, and that's to their credit also for Union.
Yeah, I mean, look, it'll be a good football game. It will. This team obviously is very good. They have young men who have put up impressive statistics so far. They're 12-1. There's a reason, but Union is not a 3-loss football team right now. They're just not. I mean, this team is playing their best football, and the one thing about winning the WPIAL championship, you have to go through a gauntlet of good teams to win it. They did, and they won it. There's no there, and especially Union, they did not have an easy path to this championship that they won. So Scotties will be ready. Should be a great game.
And talking about 2-point conversions, get back to that real quick. I was mentioning it to the Port Allegany coach the other night that Union, that's what they do. They go for 2 all the time. And he said, well, that's what we do too. So both teams go for 2. And when I asked the coach that, his analogy was, you have a 3-yard area. It's a disadvantage to the defense because the ball's so close. However, it's a disadvantage to the offense too, because you don't have a whole lot of area to work with. So it's the offense's best diagram of a play versus the defense's scheme to come up with it is how he, referred back to it. And when I mentioned that to Coach Needball, he agreed. He says, yeah, it's an interesting, opinion, but it's accurate. So we'll see. I mean, that's going to be a big thing in this game, especially if both teams score. Union goes up 6-0, get that 2-point conversion, because the other team, if they get on the board, they're going for 2 whether you make it or not, and you don't want to play from behind in that regard.
Yeah, Grayson Blakely caught a 2-point conversion off of Braylon Thomas. When you're in a tight area like that, it's all about execution. You have to execute offensively to make it work, because there's not a lot of room to move around. You have to your execution has to be really excellent in that tight area. And truth be told, Union scores 4 touchdowns and they only converted 1 2-point conversion. When you score 4, the goal is to convert 2, to put 4 points on a board, just like kicking 4 extra points. So you want to be 50% in those situations. And I'm sure Coach Needball has some plays that he put in this week specifically for the 2-point conversion. And it's probably stuff that hasn't been shown on film. And, I'm sure they'll be ready for it when the time comes.
Yeah, and I mentioned the conversions also, because if you remember the Rochester playoff win, the semifinals, Union scored first, went up 6-0. They did not make the 2-point conversion. Rochester answered. They did make the 2-point conversion, made it 8-6. Union scores next, go up 12-8, but they did not make the 2-point conversion. Rochester answers. They make another 2-point conversion. Now all of a sudden you're down 16-12, and let's say, for the sake of saying, you get late in the game and you have the ball right in the middle of the field on about the 1.5-yard line, and there's 4 seconds left. Do you get risky and kick the field? Well, you can't if you're down 4 points. That's where that comes in at. You've got to make sure you're getting those, because when you don't, it's a big factor.
Well, sure. Special teams are huge. You gotta. The one thing Union did, they didn't kick it deep to Bishop Canavan, and they were concerned, obviously, about the ability of their special team to keep Bishop Canavan from taking it to the house. So special teams are big. You got to make sure your kick coverage is good, your punt coverage is good, and ideally, you better have a couple new plays up your sleeve for 2-point conversions that haven't been put on film, in hopes that you can catch the defense, sleeping, so to speak. And I'm sure they're working on that this week. Coach Needball has seen this movie before, so he knows how it ends. He knows what to do, and I'm sure they're putting in a few plays right now, just to solve that puzzle of the 2-point conversion.
And now that we are in the state playoffs, one thing that you won't really hear anybody talk about, because everybody is a district champ, there are 1 seed, is the seeds. I'm not sure what Port Allegany was in the District 9 playoffs, but Union was a 10 seed. Larry, not only because they won the district championship, they did not play at any point in the district playoffs like a 10 seed. They played every bit of a 1 seed or a 2 seed. That's how well Union played. So I think maybe seeds are a little overblown. You could look at it that way, but right now they're irrelevant because everybody's a 1 seed.
Yeah, the seeding is, the people that seed are the WPIAL, and it's a bunch of athletic directors sitting in the room and just looking at records. A lot of times, the records belie how good a team is playing, especially at the end of the year, and that certainly was the case with Union. They were not a 10 seed. Just ask Bishop Cannon.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And well, that's what we got, Larry. Union and Port Allegany Friday night, 7 p.m. Penn West Clarion University. Anything else? Any prediction that you might have for the game?
I'm never betting against the Scotties, buddy. From what I saw on Friday against Bishop Canevin, if there's a better team right now playing football at the Class 1A level than Union, I want to see it because I haven't. They didn't just beat Bishop Canevin. They dominated the game, and that is impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, they took it to them. That was a 4-quarter dominant win by Union. I also like Union. I tell you what, I'm not betting against Union. I covered a lot of their games this year. I'll have you know, in the press box, Mark Stanley told me on more than one occasion that I'm up there so much I'm an honorary Scotty, and I'm happy to be an honorary Scotty. Driving the bus, Larry. I like Union
here's
this
the
week.
Deal. Here's the deal we're going to make. When they win on Friday and they play in the state championship game next week, and we're doing this podcast on Monday or Thursday, but when we're doing our podcast on Monday of next week, you are not going to wear that Patriots jersey. If I have to drive to Union myself, I'm going to get you a Union Scotty jersey, and you're going to wear it. Deal?
That's something you don't know, Larry. I might already have something of Union. I might already have something. It needs a special occasion. And granted, a WPIAL championship is a special occasion, but Larry, I got something.
All right. Well, if you have it, you're going to wear it, and then I'm going to go. I'm going to get Mike Gunn to bring me a Union Scotty shirt, and I'll wear mine. So that's the outfit for next week.
Mine's old school. Mine's just a plain Union Scotties football T-shirt. It's very plain. It's very old school. It's nothing to do with the 2022 championship team, but it's very old school. But like I say, hey, I'm an honorary Scotty. I've rooted for this team once to have success.
Then you'll have to take off that Patriots gear next week.
Hey, it could be underneath it. There's no taking it off. It could be underneath.
No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work, baby. You got to wear the colors. So, and I'll do the same. I got my Shenango colors on. I will wear the colors next week.
Larry Kelly's always got himself covered. He's a Newcastle guy. He's a Shenango guy. He's a Riverside guy because of his daughters going to Riverside. He wakes up every day saying, it's a good day to be Larry Kelly because I'm a winner no matter what happens.
I'm a Lawrence County guy. That's who I am. I'm a Lawrence County guy.
Yeah.
I root for the home teams. I'm a homer. It's obvious.
No. All right. Union, go out and get that win on Friday, and then a short business week, because Thursday is your state championship game, Thursday afternoon. Out in Cumberland Valley High School, I believe Chapman Field. So best of luck to the Scotties, the coaching staff, the players, the community, everybody that supports the team. This is a fun time. It's a time that hasn't been seen since '79 when you went to the semis, and '73, I believe, when you went to the WPIAL title game, and '59 when you won it. This is a rare time. Embrace it, enjoy it, have a lot of fun, because who knows? As talented as you're going to be next year with the juniors that you'll have coming back as seniors, I'm sure you could have told the '59 team that we'll be back next year, and we could have told the '73 team that, the '79 team. embrace it, enjoy it. Best of luck, Union. Go out and get that victory. We'll be here to talk about it next week, and we'll hope to preview a state title game.
Growing up here was great. As a kid, you always felt safe and secure. Just about the only thing I didn't like growing up were bullies, especially when they picked on somebody smaller. That's why, as an attorney, I decided early on that I was going to fight for those people who couldn't fight for themselves. I could have gone to Pittsburgh and worked for the insurance companies, but to me, that would have been like siding with the bullies. And that's just not who I am. I'm Larry Kelly, and this is where I'm from.